And a very warm welcome to you all on the live stream. Different schedule this. I'm just turning off the volume of my iPhone. Different schedule this week, of course. We had a live stream on Tuesday and now another one on Thursday. Probably won't be the longest in the history of live streams today. Got quite a lot going on, and we have got two in the same week as well. So you don't want to hear too much from me, I'm sure. But wherever you are in the world, welcome to the stream, whatever time zone you're in, wherever you're watching from, or if you're watching stroke listening retrospectively, welcome too. And don't forget, you can join us live on the live stream by going to YouTube chat and making a comment, asking a question. Please keep them clean and relatively, I don't know, relatively positive, I suppose is the right way to say it. Although, of course, everybody is entitled to their own opinions. There's no doubt about that. So, I always try to do matters of moment, bit of a monologue. Yeah, a little bit quiet at the moment. I think the team's all going back to their factories, preparing now for Bahrain, tails between their legs in some cases. In other cases, looking forward very much to Bahrain, I'm sure. We'll see as we go into that. I'm very pleased that we'll be joined in the live stream next Tuesday, I think it's the 10th, by Mark Slade live. He'll be giving his thoughts on what he saw in the Barcelona test going into these two Bahrain tests. And then the following week, we'll have Scarbs and Mark Slade live on the streams talking about the upcoming race, obviously in Melbourne, and what we've seen in Bahrain. So don't miss any of that. In the meantime, the Winter Olympics are underway in Cortina, Italia. And look at that. Reminder, a classic reminder of one of the great sporting feats, I think. End of 1964, Ford are announcing a new version of the Cortina Mark I. And on hand in Cortina, they have Jim Clark, Henry Taylor, very quick, who went on to be competitions manager for Ford, John Whitmore, Sir John Whitmore, and a couple of other drivers as well, a few rally drivers, to drive the Cortina down the bobsled run in Cortina. So I hope that in all the TV coverage of the Winter Olympics, they pay tribute to that feat. I mean, unbelievable. I think Subaru did something in more recent times, but I mean, yeah, easy four-wheel drive, quick car. I mean, in a Cortina Mark I down the bobsled run. Yeah, Jim Clark obviously embraced it all and loved it. And afterwards, they all stood around at the bottom of the run. It was very snowy, obviously, and Jimmy was wearing Sir John Whitmore's pullover because he didn't bring anything warm. And they all got, as they would, the kids, they all got involved in a snowball fight, throwing snowballs at one another. And Jimmy actually, in doing that, slipped a disc in his back. Very, very painful. And the South African Grand Prix was very, very soon after that. And he did that race with a brace, basically a corset around his paw. And he won the race, won the Grand Prix, amazingly. But he probably decided not to do any more runs down the bobsled in a Cortina again, I would think. And obviously then to have the snowball fight afterwards. So I thought you'd enjoy that one. This is another one. And you're going to think, what is Windsor on about here? Do we care about truck racing? Well, I actually went to a truck race once at Zolder. Which was, yeah, it was what it was. And at the Nürburgring last year, there was a truck race just about to gather strength, and it was just packed. But I'm not into truck racing, as you can probably imagine. But that came through the email in the inbox the other day. And I've got that up because that's what it would look like if Formula One took control of itself again and just worked with the FIA, and we didn't have a third-party commercial rights holder, i.e. Liberty. Now, everybody, I think, today takes for granted that Formula One is F1, it's Liberty, and it's everything that happens around that, and the FIA are administrators. But we should never forget, here's a good example, that a championship can exist run by the FIA, promoted by the FIA in every respect, commercially in every other respect, media-wise, and the championship in itself largely owned by the teams. So I thought that was just a reminder that it'll never happen in Formula One again, I think, because obviously everybody out there wants to make as much money as possible. But it could, that's basically why we're at today with Formula One, a lot of which is very good. Don't think I'm knocking it. And where we were before. And Bernie was the sort of bridge between the two, if you like. And yeah, I just thought it was interesting because you don't often see that. You don't often. It's obviously because the Truck Racing Championship, I guess, is in trouble and didn't find a third-party commercial rights holder to come in and buy it, give all the teams lots of money, and that's why it's going that way. But nonetheless, it's an interesting fallback, isn't it? If if the whole economy imploded tomorrow and there was no money anywhere, don't worry about it. Formula One will still exist. It'll just be the FIA and the teams. Interesting. Okay, on that, I've got to just point out that I'm doing as many as I can, getting through questions that I don't get through in the live stream, trying to get them on the community page of our channel. So I did a whole tranche of those yesterday. Didn't get through them all either then, but thank you very much again, everybody who asks questions and gets involved. And I'm doing my best. We've got some plans of how we're going to handle that going forward, I think. But have a look at that communities page on the channel, because there's quite a lot of, not just necessarily from me, but there's a lot of stuff there now, and people are using it well. And I think it'll just grow and grow and grow. It's a very good thing. And I've got to confess that stupidly, when I wrote down on my notebook 2 live streams ago about the question, I didn't actually record the name of the person who asked the question. So my sincere apologies that I'm not giving you credit for this. But it was a very good question about why the teams, why we still have in Formula One this business of pick up as much gravel and crud on the tyres as you can on the in-lap to get a bit of weight into the tyres before the car's weighed in Parc Fermé, and why they don't change the rules and just weigh the cars without the wheels. Well, and I said, well, I'll look into that. It's an interesting question, because it had crossed my mind as well at one point. And as I say, my apologies for not remembering who asked it, but it is a very good question, because it gives me a chance now to say, well, that is exactly what is happening. The rules are changing in 2026, which I didn't realize. And thanks to Mark Slade for helping with this as well. It's in the technical regulations now that there will be a nominal mass, they call it mass rather than weight, for the wheels and tires. And that will be the same for all the cars, and the cars will effectively be weighed in their own right without that nominal mass applied. So in theory, no longer are they going to need to do all that business of picking up as much rubble as they can on the tires. The weight of the cars is now what, 726 for the race, 724 for qualifying. The difference of two kilos because of the plank wear, fluids, brakes and things like that. So it's about 2 kilos of loss. But the interesting thing is that the tires, I mean, you could say, the skeptic in me would say immediately, oh, well, what you do then is run lightweight wheels, would you not, in the first stint of the race off the line, maybe the middle of the race, and just finish with the heavier wheels. But of course, you can't do that anymore, because BBS have basically proprietary wheels for everybody, and it'd be very, very difficult probably to sneak through with a wheel that looked legal but was actually lighter. But in theory now, you could actually run a lighter wheel, providing it looked the same as the proper one and you weren't caught by Pirelli in those first 2 stints, and get a bit of an unsprung weight advantage in theory. So yeah, thank you very much for doing that. And I think the main reason Formula One are doing this, actually, if I think about it, is probably, and actually say I think about it, I think Mark suggested it, it's probably because when there's some sort of tire drama and Pirelli react by making the tire stiffer or whatever, stronger, that puts on weight. And that was always a bit of a complication with the car being weighed with those heavier tires, therefore. So that's now been removed as a nominal weight, and that makes sense to me. And now Pirelli can basically increase the weight or not as they need to from a safety point of view, without it having an issue onto the overall weight of the car. Still heavy though, isn't it? 726. It's a very heavy car. I keep seeing in the light of my Lotus Elan, but anyway, I suppose not many people these days think about Lotus Elans in terms of road cars, but I do. And it's much lighter than a Formula One car now. It's impressive, isn't it? That was one thing. The other thing is the front wing mounting. There's a bit of talk already about that front wing mounting that Mercedes have got, and I think Red Bull have got a similar system, Adrian Newey, which possibly explains why Esteban Ocon has been saying it was quite difficult to follow another car in Barcelona. And I think it was George Russell, might have been Antonelli, but one of the Mercedes drivers saying, oh, no, it's actually quite good following another car. I'm just wondering, stirring the pot here, whether with that front wing mounting they've got, they're actually able to get a bit more. The reason behind it actually is to get a bit more flex in the front wing, and it's going to be legal. And if so, that'll be quite a differentiator as well, I think. I don't know how quickly other teams would be able to adapt to that. If it is legal and it does give them more flex, then we're going to see a bit of fur flying in that area as well, I think. And the final point, and somebody may raise this as well in the live stream now, but the final point is just things arising from the test and questions people are asking. There was another question on the chat box which I wasn't able to get to, and which I didn't reply to either because I ran out of time. But it was the rumor, the suggestion that some of the teams in Barcelona were not running the new 100% fully synthetic fuel. And was that true? Well, I don't know for sure, and I don't think any team is actually going to admit to that. But I wouldn't be surprised if some of the teams from the midfield downwards might have taken that option for a couple of reasons. One, I suspect there's not a lot of that stuff around yet, and it's probably quite difficult to get. Well, it's not difficult to get if you really want it, but there's not a massive amount of that fuel around even at this point of the year. Hopefully there will be by Melbourne, hopefully by Bahrain actually. And secondly, I suspect if you're buying it, it's unbelievably expensive compared with last year's fuel. So a lesser team might well have taken the option that if the engine, the power unit is running well on the test bed with the synthetic fuel, why not save a bit of money? And because in theory, it's just a drop in fuel, isn't it? It should work straight away and do that. And I suspect that's probably what was happening if that was the case. But as I say, I doubt we'll ever find out if that really was the case. I don't think anyone will actually own up to it. As we said before, I think there'll be quite a lot of badging going on. The obvious one that springs to mind will be BP Castrol with Audi, and whether or not, I doubt they're actually building their own, formulating their own fuel, and they're probably taking fuel from some sort of, well, somebody else and badging it. That's basically what will be going on, I suspect. But yeah, it's an interesting one. The whole fuel thing is a whole new area, isn't it, of development, and that'll be fascinating to follow that too. But yeah, maybe some teams are still running last year's fuel in Barcelona. Who knows? Okay, let's get on with the chat, which I'm going to try and do a better job with this time. I've actually reproportioned the chat box that I'm seeing now. It means that I can't actually see what I'm doing, but that's in terms of myself and camera. But I think you guys are much more important, aren't you? So that's the thing. I'll just make sure that this has come up there. Just think of that. Where are we? Sorry. Browser. Okay, 1 second. Nearly there. Being a bit too clever here, I think. Okay, hopefully that's come up now, is it? Yes, there it is. So good. Right, finally ready to get going. This is from Aaron, one of our regulars. Hey, Aaron. I find Formula One drivers to be in the unique position of their actual job of driving, obviously almost entirely hard skill-based, and yet they can be exposed to many activities requiring soft skills, media activities, a kind of leadership role in the team as one of the only two drivers. Do you have any examples of drivers who were passed over due to their lack of soft skills, or drivers who succeeded with a lack of soft skills? And the soft skills you're referring to are media activities, a kind of leadership role in the team as one of only two drivers. So I've always thought of it the other way, drivers that actually have no skill, none of those skills, and still are unbelievably quick. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen springs to mind, doesn't he? And he never had a problem in his career really getting a drive because of who he was. So what you want is an example of a driver who didn't get an opportunity despite being unbelievably quick. I guess that's what we got to say, because they were not very good at media activities. Well, I think certainly. I think Ron Dennis was the first team owner to put a premium on how the driver looked and presented himself. But having said that, if Mika Hakkinen didn't come over that well in interviews in the day, he does now very well. But let's say Mika didn't want to do interviews. I don't think it was a problem for Ron. And if I think back to the ethos of the team owners of that period and before that, it was always, no, we want somebody quick. Keep your mouth shut. Doesn't matter what you do. As long as you're quick, you're doing the job. I mean, that would have been Bernie's, Frank's philosophy all the time. I mean, in Frank's case, he quite enjoyed all the sort of bits that came with the driver. Whether he had a nice girlfriend and whether lots of friends and how he was thought of in the community. I mean, he loved Nelson, for example, because Nelson was just, he was just there, wasn't he? He was in the middle of it all. Whereas Nigel, I always think Nigel possibly, I mean, he's a good example, actually. Nigel, even though actually he's probably very good in interviews, and I think he always was, providing you sort of having a chat to him beforehand, reminding him what be the right way to approach various subjects. But I think if I think about it now, I would say if Nigel had a completely different soft side to his personality and had been sort of Ayrton Senna like in the way he lived his life away from the racing car, very cool, very cultivated, very just full of charisma, then Ron Dennis probably would have given him a drive. He would have given me a drive. When I went up to Ron actually in 1981 and said, what do you think about Nigel Mansell? And he just sort of looked at me as if I was mad. And I think a few team owners actually might have taken Nigel a lot more seriously. So that's a good example actually of a guy who had to wait a long time to get a real opportunity in Formula One, purely because you could argue, in the way you're phrasing it, Aaron, his soft skills weren't that great. That's a good one. Sad, isn't it? It's pathetic, really, because the only thing that matters is the job the driver does in the car, providing he's professional in everything he does as a racing driver. He should never be judged. And I'm not going to mention his name now, but I know there is a very good young, very talented young driver out there now who has a bit of a speech impediment, I think. That's probably the wrong word, but he's just slightly challenged in terms of public speaking. And several teams are sort of saying, no, I'm not really interested. And I think that's terrible. I think it's absolutely terrible, because it's all about the job the driver does in the racing car, isn't it? This But I guess to finish that, a lot of teams would think, well, we're all media hubs in our own right now. We don't need the journalists. We don't need the media. We've got our own TV package at the races, which Formula One does, and we do everything else. And if we don't like the driver's way of presentation, we don't like the way he looks, we're entitled not to have him. It's a TV show as much. That's probably how some of the teams, very sadly, probably how some of them think these days. This Arapera. Hi, Peter. Can you explain your rationale regarding Daniel being an adequate driver to keep in the McLaren instead of replacing with Oscar? As we've seen with the Red Bull second seat, doesn't having such a large gap between drivers compromise the chances of a team securing the Constructors' Championship? E.g., Ferrari would have got World Constructors' Champion in 24 had it been Daniel and Lando instead of Oscar and Lando. Well, my rationale is that I don't consider Daniel Ricciardo to be very slow at all. I think he's a quicker driver than Sergio Perez, for example, and much quicker and better. And I think he would have been very close to Lando. He might have out-qualified him a few times, might have out-raced him a few times, and he certainly would have had his share of winning. But I think because he's an experienced, polished driver who's been through everything that you need to go through to get to that level, he would have been the perfect number two, if that's the right word, for Lando Norris. Perfectly balanced team. It was a bit like Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, really good team, and at Ferrari. And it was the same thing at McLaren. They had it. It was a really, really good team. Whereas you bring in somebody very much younger, less experienced, completely different path, who's potentially quicker than Lando, because he's on the upslope of his career and he's very talented anyway. Whereas no doubt Daniel was on the sort of downslope. then you've got a problem because Lando's then thinking, well, this guy's quick. And so it proved. Yes, they won the championship in the end, but it could have been much smoother, much easier, and they would have won the championship anyway with Lando and Daniel, and they would have won the constructors as well, for sure. It's just a smoother path. And drivers like Daniel Ricciardo in 2025 don't come along very often. Drivers who are on the sort of slightly, they're on the slope down now, and they're very composed, very mature, but they're still very quick with a very good brain, and they can still race really well, and they're perfect for the team in terms of its image and so forth. So that was my point. They didn't need to replace Daniel Ricciardo. They had the driver, the right driver alongside Lando to win the championships. And it's the same at Ferrari, exactly the same thing. They didn't need to replace Carlos Sainz. What they needed to do was get Adrian Newey, which they didn't do. They got the priorities wrong. In McLaren's case, they had everything set up. And then, oh, Oscar Piastri's on the market. We better sign him quick. Oh, Daniel, yeah, he's out. And it was like a sort of panic, instant thing. Let's get it. And of course, from Oscar's point of view, absolutely no choice. Alpine or McLaren, of course you go with McLaren. Of course you're going to win. Of course you're going to be potentially a world champion at McLaren. But that's not the point. Same with Lewis. You know, you're not happy at Mercedes. Things aren't going as well as they could have, should have, would have. And so you get this big offer from Ferrari, lots of money, but Ferrari, of course you go. You can't blame Lewis. You can't blame Oscar. But what I'm saying is the decision making at the top, I don't think they made the right decisions. They should have kept Daniel and they should have kept Carlos Sainz. Right. Jez James. Hi, Peter. Do you think Sir Frank was not only super detailed, intelligent, caring, but quite cold as well? A bit like Doc Martin seems to be. Oh, yeah. Frank definitely had his cold side. I don't think he was. I don't, the whole Doc Martin, it's not a bad comparison, actually. Although, Sheridan and I often used to compare the whole thing to Yes Minister. And Frank, of course, was the minister. And Sheridan was Sir Humphrey, and I was Bernard. And that was actually more appropriate, I think. There was a lot of things that Sherry and with my help, I guess, we got through. We sneaked through with Frank not really knowing what he was signing or agreeing to, purely because we chose the right moment in which to go to him or the right way in which to present it. Both of those things very important. Or leading Frank down a path where he suddenly realized that it wasn't going to work. I mean, Frank's main thing was he never really wanted to make a decision about anything, particularly under pressure, and he was very, very indecisive. So that was one thing. Secondly, he wasn't really interested in life beyond Formula One and flying and running and history. And so anything else that he had to do family wise or holiday wise was an annoyance to him. So if you filter all that together, you've got an unusual person. That's probably the right way to phrase it. But as I said before, the Monday after the British Grand Prix, both races, 91 and 92, I remember, I'd be there early, obviously. We had to get the hire cars back and all this stuff. And Frank would be there, morose, not smiling, very, very focused on looking down at the floor where he was, thinking, and you'd think, what's wrong with him? What's happened to make him like this? We just won the British Grand Prix. And it was his way of coping. It was just like, it's almost bad luck to sit back and enjoy the win. I just want to focus on the next race. That's what a racer does. And all this stuff you see today, if a team wins a championship or even wins a race and the celebrations that happen and the pictures they do, Frank would hate all that stuff. Well, for his own team, he would have hated it all. He probably wouldn't have turned up for the pictures because for him, the checkered flag drop, end of story, next race, please. No chance to relax, enjoy. Well, not no chance, no desire to relax and enjoy. It was all just getting on with business. And it was a sort of disciplinary thing that he did go to a very strict Jesuit school. And I think it came from that, really. It was just like, and I think he had quite a lonely childhood. I may be wrong there, but that's the impression I get. And I think he was just, when in doubt, go to a very strict regime and follow that. That's why he was so into running. because it required an incredible discipline, particularly in the British winters of rain and cold and wind. And but yet he would go out there, half marathon here, quarter marathon there, preparing for the big marathon on Sunday or whatever it was. Serious running, to the point where Seb Coe would say, "Yeah, I've got to work quite hard to do this run with Frank. It's not just a jolly with him." And he was like that, and he was like that on the road. Pre-accident, he's like that on the road, pretty full on. Wanted to get from A to B as quickly as possible, minimize the chances. And whenever he was traveling, it was always what time his wheels up, what time his estimated arrival time, down to the minute. Everything was very precise, but not so much because he was a detail guy like Ron Dennis, who used to use scissors to get his gardener to cut the grass at exactly the right length around the doormat, things like that. No, the Frank wasn't like that. Frank was doing these other things because of this very strict regimen he had around his frame of life, and it was a discipline thing for him. It was a discipline thing, and he couldn't tolerate really a lack of discipline. And I suppose that was one of the reasons he would walk around po-faced after a Grand Prix on the Monday morning, because he felt that that was the way of instilling in the mechanics and everybody in the factory that there was another race to be run very soon, and let's be focused on that. Don't waste time celebrating this win. I think it was that, and he, as good as he was in terms of linguistics, and as good a public speaker as he was, and as funny as he was when he was relaxed, he didn't really enjoy talking and hanging out with the sponsors and talking about the team and talking about himself. That wasn't Frank at all. He just felt that was somebody else should do that. And I used to do a lot of events with Frank, with our sponsors, but he would only do it if I could talk to him, if I could ask him a few questions. He'd never want to speak proactively, and he wouldn't want the interview to be more than 2 or 3 minutes ever. So there you go. I know, it's interesting. Frank, fascinating guy, and he taught me a lot. I mean, I think I became more disciplined working for Frank, and big thanks to him for that. Jez again, different subject. In my youth, I once saw you. I recognise you from a TV documentary about Frank chatting away on your mobile at the 97 TWR driver launch open day. As we got to Tom's Formula One driver, Damon, close up, I was quite intrigued as to whom you had been talking to while you stood next to Damon for quite a long while on the phone. I thought what could have been more important than Damon, but there you were on the phone, as us Damon fans were all making quite a fuss and noise. I guess I was quite naive, thinking it's all about the driver. Well, I don't remember that. And who would I have been talking to in 97 on the phone? It's a good question, isn't it? Well, in 97, I was still actually I was winding down our attempt to do a Formula One team with Tetsuo Ikazawa and Enrique Scalabroni, because the Japanese stock market had just collapsed. So I was probably talking to a lawyer, I would imagine, if it was that important and I was ignoring poor old Damon. I guess it was that. Tim Green. Hi, Peter. Just wondering your thoughts of reunion between Honda and Fernando, considering previous comments calling Honda engine a GP2 engine during his McLaren days. Yeah, it's a good point. I'd forgotten about all that. And I suppose you could say that's another reason that Jensen's in there, to sort of keep Honda happy and at the smiling face, and keep Fernando away from Honda if there's any aggro there still. But I think Honda would see it. Did they not prevent him running Honda engines when he went to IndyCar? I think they did, or they made it very, very difficult. And I think they would have felt, oh well, he's now paid his price. We hurt him on the IndyCar project, so all bets are off now, and we're going to be at Formula One. And anyway, of course, it's different people now. Things move on, don't they? And some people forget. Like me, I've forgotten about that. So, yeah, I mean, he was very rude about Honda in a way that was astonishing, really, given how much control Ron Dennis normally has and should have over, as any team owner should, really, over his drivers, in terms of what they say about the engine supplier or the sponsors or the tire supplier. Ron allowed Fernando to slag off Honda something rotten. and it wasn't a good thing. But because he's Fernando, double world champion, he's got all that charisma, and because it's Adrian Newey, I think it's all forgotten now and there. But certainly that's another good reason to have Jensen there, isn't it? Nicolosa 7580. Nicola Losa, sorry. Peter, thanks for sharing your knowledge. You often say long corner drivers are more prone to suffer from tyre consumption, yet why Perez is so good at time management? Same for Alonso. Well, Perez is, just because you're a long corner driver doesn't mean to say that you can't develop the skill of being very good at managing your tyres. So he is very good at managing his tyres. And don't forget, on a lot of circuits these days, there are corners where Perez isn't going to do very much, isn't going to be very different from Max. He won't be as quick into the corner, but in terms of what Max is actually doing around, say, where's a good example? Oh, from the transition point at Rascasse down to the next bit, yes, Max has got the car a little bit straighter, but because Perez has got very, very good feel for the loaded rear there, yeah, he's coming in from a little bit wider and he's got a little bit more steering lock than has Max at the point that they're both getting on the power. Perez has got very good feel, and it's not going to, it's still going to work for him, and it's still going to add up for him around Monaco. He's not going to beat Max on a good lap around Monaco, but it's going to give him a big advantage over a lot of other drivers, and that's what you see. And it's not that Max wouldn't be now as good as Perez with tire management at the rear, probably better, I would think. It's just that Perez will be better than a lot of the midfield guys with his time management, purely because he's always had that gift of how he puts the power down. He's very good in that area. So, and same for Alonso. Alonso is a different sort of driver. He's a bit like Vettel in that he sort of falls between a number of different camps as a driver, in my view, because he's very, very soft touch, very, very supple, and he's very good at feeling the surface of the road to the point where he usually has all four tires pretty square to the road at most given moments. Not all, obviously, but he's very, very good. But it's very unusual to see Fernando approaching a rotation point or just after a rotation point where the car doesn't look completely sucked to the road with its tires square to the road. He's so good at that. Whereas a driver like, say, Liam Lawson or Carlos will be slightly, slight bit of oversteer, a bit more lean, bit more curvature on the sidewall of the tire, things like that slip. But the Fernando, the thing that makes Fernando very different from Charles or Max, in my opinion, is his initial steering input. Whatever it is, it's just a natural idiosyncrasy, a bit like Ayrton Senna's throttle blipping. He always has to do that with the steering just to get the car slightly unsettled, and then he's at one with the car. But he needs to feel that moment of the car just on the edge, which he provokes with the steering, which Max would never do. Max would never provoke a car like that. He would always try to keep it absolutely as stable as possible, whereas Fernando thrives on that instability, and that to me makes him not quite as good as Max, because I think that's an imperfection, but it's what he needs to do as a racing driver, and it's completely natural and instinctive to him, and it works for him. And so, yeah, fine, leave it. That is Fernando Alonso, and it's brilliant that he's managed to keep that throughout his driving career, and he still has it as his trademark. And woe betide anybody that tries to copy that. And I think that's one of the reasons Lance Stroll sort of sinks without trace alongside Fernando, but he didn't look that bad alongside Sebastian Vettel. But if Lance Stroll starts to look at what Fernando's doing with his initial steering input, he'll be all over the place, and that's why sometimes he struggles. I think struggles a lot. So, but is Fernando good on time management? Of course he is. He's unbelievably good on time management because he's supple, because he's soft with his inputs, and he's very, very good with his footwork. Incredibly soft footwork. Amazing, which I've seen close up in a Renault Megane Turbo. Just dancing on the pedals. Absolutely beautiful to watch. And so different, every driver is different. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say Perez is better than anybody than these days with traction. But there was a point, I think, at Red Bull when he was better than Max, and Max quickly upped his game and learnt from that. But now, yeah, if you put him alongside, I keep saying Lawson, but I mean he's a fairly good sort of stakeholder in terms of a wide entry, late braking, reflexy driver. If you put him alongside that, he'll definitely have better rear tire management, I would imagine, than Lawson. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how Perez drives these now. I suppose he'd be quite fired up, but having said that, he's getting on a bit and been around, and it's all, he's got lots of, I mean, the thing about Valtteri and Perez now, I'm not saying that this is in any way something that they will be thinking, but the reality, if it is, the absolute reality check, is that there's no pressure on them at all, is there? Because they're just going to be as quick as the car wants to go, and it won't be that quick anyway, probably. And there'll be no pressure on them to do well. So it's a perfect thing for them to be doing in the latter days of their careers, or restarted careers. Another one from Nicola Losa. Hi, Peter. Brief question about the past. Could you please compare Jack Brabham and Graham Hill in terms of their driving styles and overall skills? I didn't get the chance to watch them. Thank you. Just going to do another check that these are all coming up. Yeah, they are. That's good. Well, they weren't that dissimilar in terms of driving style. They both, I mean, in an era when the tires slid a lot more and didn't slow the car down when they were sliding, and you could use a lot of angle to get the car where you wanted it at the apex. Both Graham and Jack, I would say possibly more than any other two drivers of that era, used to use the power oversteer a lot, just to control the car and get it absolutely right. And you see many pictures of both of them with at least 20 degrees of opposite lock of the car, Formula One cars we're talking about, before any given corner. And very similar and very, very soft and beautifully applied, everything perfectly balanced, lovely to watch. Whereas a Jimmy would do that, but he usually do it for fun, because he didn't need to do it in order to get everything as he wanted to with the short corner and the transition point. That was all happening for him naturally with the steering and the throttle and the brakes. But if you weren't doing what Jimmy was doing, you could get around that by using the throttle. You can't do that today. There is no way around. If trying to do what Max does without doing what Max does, if you see what I mean, there is no way to do that. Whereas in those days, I think you could sort of get the car ready where you really wanted to by good use of the throttle and power oversteer. So they were both mega power oversteer drivers. I once said to Dan Gurney, you weren't massively into sliding the car as much as Jack Brabham, for example, were you, Dan? And he was quite insulted and offended, and shortly afterwards sent me a picture of him driving the 64 Brabham at the Nürburgring on massive opposite lock, saying, there you go, Peter, I used to like it too, or something. I was quite good at it too, or something. And but I think Jack was, I mean, the cliche at the time was that Jack, because he grew up on speedway racing on dirt in Australia, he grew up with sliding the car and oversteer and opposite lock, and that's why he was always like that racing in Europe. I think that's a bit of a simplification, because they're two completely different things. And there were days when Jack wasn't sideways anywhere. He was just driving the car on rails. But in general, Graham and Jack had that talent of being able to set the car up beautifully. And some days they were just unbeatable. I mentioned on Tuesday, Jack winning the 66 German Grand Prix in the wet, unbeatable. And nullifying the advantage of the Repco engine might have had over 2-litre cars or whatever. And equally, Graham 64 Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, unbeatable. Monaco on many years, particularly 65, unbeatable. And so they're both very, very good. And both of them very good in other forms of racing as well. I mean, Jack drove everything from Ford Galaxies to Matra sports cars, and Formula 2 was quick in everything. Graham the same. Graham started 3.8 Jags to Lotus Cortinas to sports cars, winning Le Mans in a Matra. Just amazingly talented. I mean, Jack was also good at Indy. He missed the sort of Jim Clark revolution, but he was there with a Cooper as well, going quickly. They just that momentum sort of went away, and and he was focusing on his own team by then. But both of them, both Graham and Jack, adapted very quickly to IndyCar racing as well. So yeah, very, very similar actually, and very difficult to separate them in terms of their overall talent and how good they were. I would describe both of them as great Grand Prix drivers, great racing drivers, and and the legacy lives on from both in so many ways. Jack's legacy of effectively working very closely with John and Charles Cooper to develop the 59, 60 championship winning Formula One Coopers is pretty Michael Schumacher like. And then he went on, of course, to do his own team and to start the whole business of drivers doing their own team. Bruce McLaren, Dan Gurney, John Surtees. And and that's the McLaren team we have today, of course. And in Graham's case, being this sort of global ambassador for Formula One, yes, Jackie Stewart came along as well and was a great double act with Graham. But Graham was the funny guy actually. I mean, he was brilliant. The one-liners, the dapper dressing, and the ability to talk to non-racing people in a way that they understood and loved was way ahead of his time. And he, in terms of great ambassadors for motor racing, Graham Hill has to be right up there near the top. A lot of work for charity too, through the Springfield Boys Club and the Doghouse Club with Betty, his wife. So yeah, both of them great drivers. Thank you for asking me that question, because it's interesting how they can be bracketed together, actually, in my opinion. Frosty is messaging from Ontario, Canada, 5 a.m. Hopefully it's a little bit later and a little bit warmer, probably not. I love your input into everything racing. Are there any other upcoming drivers to keep an eye on in the feeder series? Yeah, always are. I mean, Soloff is very good, we think, and we've got Ugo, I think, who's just won the Oceania series, very talented as well. He's doing Formula 3 with Campos, I think, this year. Might do some Super Formula because he was quickest in the Super Formula test. That would be good. A lot of young drivers. I mean, I'm not going to go through them all because you get to the point where you mention 6 or 7, and then the some that don't get mentioned, you think, what planet is he on? But I mean, Ugo's definitely got a lot of talent and is somebody that needs to be watched. I think an amazing guy. He's Nigerian, the son of a Nigerian supermodel who's married to an Italian fashion designer, raised in and he was raised in Manhattan, so he's an American, obviously, and there he is winning Oceania, doing really well, and then topping the Super Formula tests at Suzuka last year. So very talented guy. We'll see how Cali Rovanpera goes. I mean, as you probably know, the World Rally Champion twice over has now decided to switch to single seaters with a view to getting to Formula One. Toyota backing him all the way. There is a path there from Oceania, Formula Toyota, then to Super Formula, and then over to Formula 2 with High Tech, who have an association with Toyota as well, and then in theory into the Haas Formula 1 team with Toyota's backing. But it's been a rocky road so far for Cali, with some health issues, dizziness in the Super Formula tests, and then missed the last 4 races in the last round in New Zealand recently due to being ill as well. So we'll see how that goes. Good. Let's have a look at some others. Andretti Global Formula One team. I don't think that's a real thing, but that's whatever your name is. Good to have you on board. Hi, Peter. If Mario goes to the Australian Grand Prix this year, would you go and drive him around where you grew up, like he did for you a few years ago? Well, for those that haven't seen that, that's a video I did with Mario. He very kindly spent a few hours with me in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, a few years ago. Went up to see him, and we just drove around Nazareth in his Jag, and he And he said, "Oh, this is where I went to school here, and this is where Michael done there." It was just, and this is after I won my first race. This is where I came. It was just wonderful stuff. And if you haven't seen it, it is on the channel. Mario talks us through many things. I grew up in Sydney, obviously. So not obviously, but I grew up in Sydney, and so it wouldn't be quite as easy for me to do it around Melbourne. I don't really know my way around Melbourne too much. So it's a nice idea. I think I would rather go back to Mario, to Nazareth again, and have another look around with him and spend some time with him. Time with Mario is never wasted time. He's just, very few people you think, well, in my case, very few people I just want to I could spend all day with and just hang out. Even if we're not talking, I'd just be happy. And Mario Andretti is one of them. I just think he's an amazing guy. And we don't necessarily always talk about motor racing. There's a million things: music, politics, whatever, history and geography. And yeah, I really miss him. Well, I miss him being around. Haven't seen him, so I need to go and see him. There you go. That's what I'm trying to say. From the same Andretti Global F1 team, Peter, which is the best country to live in? Spain, UK, USA, or Australia? It's interesting, isn't it? Because I have actually lived in all four of those countries. Still living in Spain, and hope to continue to living in Spain. So, I mean, I can only judge from what I was doing at the time that I was living in those countries. I think Australia is an unbelievably great country in which to grow up as a kid. My life in Australia was, school started at 8:20, I think, from memory, and I used to get the 7 o'clock Manly ferry to Circular Quay in Sydney, which meant that I was walking on the path to the Manly ferry at 6:30, which means I was getting up about 6, I guess, and then walking to the ferry, getting the ferry, doing my homework and everything on the ferry, getting to Circular Quay, and then getting to school about 8:15, and getting a bus. Long trip to school, but worth it. Cross the harbour every day and then back. And that's what I did. That's what I did every day, really, of my whole school life. And then equally, you go home in the evening and you just, from the wharf, Manly Wharf, you go straight down to the beach and go surfing. So it's a pretty cool country. And then there's the cricket and the golf and the tennis, all of which I loved, all right on your doorstep, and the great weather. And the great motor racing we had too, the Tasman Series, then all the national racing, Warwick Farm. It was a perfect time for anybody to grow up, from any era, really. So Australia, yeah, brilliant. America, I love America. I've been there so many times, just traveling around doing the Civil War sites, or going to places like going to California, visiting friends, going to the aerospace area of California, which I love. Going to Colorado, the Rockies. I've done so. I'm so lucky to have done so much in America. Not sure I want to live there today, got to say. UK, similar thing, really. I mean, when I landed in the UK for the first time, aged 19, the wheels touched down at London Airport, and I can remember the moment as if it was yesterday. And I just thought, wow, I can't believe I'm on the same bit of land as Dennis Jenkinson, Mike Dudson, Jim Clark, and actually I remember thinking Graham Hill. They were all on this bit of land on which I was now landing. And that's what England was to me. It was just, this was the center of the motor racing world, and I couldn't get enough of it. Ever, really. Motoring News, Autosport, all the racetracks I wanted to visit. The smell of Motoring News when you open the new edition on a Thursday, even if it was cold, if it was wet, that added to the whole drama of the thing, because it was so unusual for me. And I drove down. I remember I bought, Keith Holland was a very, very good racing driver. He came out to do the Tasman Series, and I became quite good friends with him. And when I came back to England, I bought a Vauxhall VX 490 from him for 175, I think it was in the end, 175 quid. And I drove that around down to Goodwood, Snetterton, everywhere, and I had my wheels, and I was just driving around. I just couldn't stop. Every team that I'd read about, I wanted to go and visit their factory, and if they weren't there, I'd just look at it from the outside, whether it be Felday Engineering, who are actually very, very accommodating, or whether it be Downton Formula 3 engine tuning, whatever it was, I wanted to be there. And so England, that's what England means for me. Sadly, again, not a place I'd really want to live today. I think COVID and Brexit have kind of, the whole double whammy just changed the place completely. And Spain, for me, is one of the few countries in the world now where it's still relatively cheap to live well, but by which I mean clean air, nice roads, low cost of living, low cost of housing, and beautiful climate. Very like, in some ways, it's very like Australia, the Australia in which I grew up. So Spain for me is one of the last undiscovered great countries of the world because it's in Europe. It's still in more or less in the center of everything, and it's beautifully connected. Incredible infrastructure, nice people, and we live 15 minutes from the ocean, where Jack swims most afternoons in the summer. And we live 15 minutes from the mountains where we go hiking and where the views are just amazing. And we've got 8 golf courses within about half an hour of us. And for those that don't like golf, no problem, because a golf course is still a much more attractive thing at which to look than blocks of flats or houses or congested roads. And the air is clean and it's easy to do things here. Everything works. Touch wood. Wi-Fi. So yeah, no, I love Spain, and I feel very blessed to be able to live here, to be honest. Okay, next question. Morning from Miran. Please let me know which Formula One tracks offer corners like Barca Turn 3 to check and test short corners while watching drivers, and for me to test in the sim. Oh, it's cool that you remember Turn 3. Yeah, it's the exit of, you go through, in Barcelona it's 1, and then it's as they're going into 2, what they do in the middle of 2 defines how they come out of 2, and then it defines what they then are able to do going into 3, which is a very, very quick, fast right-hander. And a lot of drivers want to come out, touch the curb on the right, and then go way over to the center of the road, and then turn in quite wide for 3. But they're flat, so it's great. But in being flat, they've used more road and they put more energy through the tires. So if you watch a Max coming out of there, he'll give exactly the right rotation in the middle of 2 to get him a much straighter exit out of 2. And then he comes out of 2, he's on the power sooner, he's traveling in a straight line. And then going into 3, he only moves maybe 1 car's width to the left going into 3, whereas Perez or Lawson will move 1.5 to 2 cars width going into 3. And that's the difference. And you can see it there very clearly if you're standing on the inside of the circuit. Into Copse Corner, Silverstone's another good one. The best one, if you can get there, and hopefully we'll see some of it on the TV, is 9-10 in Bahrain. How they come out of 9 and how they create a straight line braking area for 10, very important. And the great drivers will be super quick through 9 without compromising their ability actually to have a little bit of point where the car is absolutely straight for them to brake hard into 10. And they're never braking with load in the car, locking up the inside front, or maybe destabilizing the rear, or running a little bit wide. Of course, you've then got that long straight, and you do that and the lap's gone completely. Turn 1 at Suzuka, another one, very, very, very good corner. But I'm just saying, Melbourne, quite difficult to see anything in Melbourne, actually. It's a pretty, what's the right word? Pretty boring track, actually, in that sense. I mean, I don't think you're going to see a Lawson doing a lot different from a Hadjar around Melbourne. Just tiny things. I mean, don't forget, it's not only what I've just described, those places where you can actually see a Max doing what he does. Even on corners where Max looks about the same as everybody else, he's still doing it differently because he's doing it with his own rate of inputs. He's perfectly balancing the input rate to what the car is doing, to what he's doing with his hands and feet, as does Fernando, as does Charles Leclerc, whereas others will be not quite as perfectly synchronized. And we're talking tiny, tiny details that will not show up on telemetry, on readouts, but they are the difference. They make a difference over a lap and certainly over a race distance, and all add up. And those things are very difficult to see and to understand even. But I can assure you they are there, because if they weren't perfectly in harmony with the surface of the road, and their inputs weren't perfectly balanced and matched, then they wouldn't be able to do what they do with short corners. And they wouldn't be as good as they are in the wet either, for that matter. So, yeah. I haven't given you a lot of good examples, but there'll be more, I guess. Owen, hi Peter, what do you think about rain and the new regs? As an F1 fan, I see rain affecting races more and more. Will this continue with the new aero and tyres? Well, wet tires, by which I mean intermediates and wets, by the way, were never, you never needed to pick up crud at the end of a race on the tire because they were already weighed separately and given their own minimum weight check. So that's kind of, that rule is now extended into the dry tires. Uh, I don't know. What are we saying? There's more rain around, and therefore there'll be more wet races. And because we have 24 races, the odds of having more wet races are even greater. Yeah, I guess that's true, isn't it? I think there's been a bit of a backlash about delayed starts and rolling starts, and Formula One's trying to make an effort to show that it can perform in the rain and it can do standing starts in the rain. So I'm hoping that that will continue and that they don't all chicken out, and that we will have some proper racing in the rain. And I don't know, I don't know what else to say about it really. I mean, that's it. What these Formula One cars will be like in the rain, I suspect they'll be pretty impressive to watch, won't they? Because there's a lot of torque, a lot of power there. And you get it wrong, they'll all be running maximum downforce, I guess, won't they? The whole active DRS thing won't come into play, but there'll still be plenty of stuff for them to have to harness, and be less pressure on the whole power harvesting thing, power management over the lap, I guess, in the wet. So it'll be more focus on just getting the power down smoothly and driving well. And I still think the great drivers will find, on any given corner, they'll find where the grip is, and that may well be on the outside, or it might be doing an angle across the line, whatever it is. You'll see the great drivers finding that grip within a lap or two of the rain falling. And yeah, be interesting to see what it's like in terms of rooster tails and how bad they are. I guess there'll be less, maybe. I think the ground effect cars produce bigger rooster tails than before. And then the other big issue, of course, is when the standing water, when the spray has nowhere to go and it just falls back and it makes the visibility poor. And that, sadly, a lot of the new circuits are conducive to that because they have the mesh fencing on the straights and all that stuff on these circuits like Miami, and not that it rains in Saudi Arabia, but certainly Miami's a good example, I guess, and Vegas too, where if it's wet, there will be quite a lot of problems with vision. Yeah, thanks. Owen again. Peter, what's your favorite? No, sorry, Owen here. Peter, oh, I haven't got it up now. Sorry. I bet what's happened here? Well, this is from Kossi Yab. I can't even get that one to work now. Sorry, I have to go back here and then come back here. Anyway, it's not on there, I don't think, but I'm going to read this one out. Oh, here you go. It's just come up. Good. Hi Peter, what's your favorite all-time helmet design, and what do you think of modern versus vintage? Well, it'd have to be dark blue with a white peak, wouldn't it? Border Reavers, Jim Clark. Actually, it was just dark blue for quite a lot of seasons, particularly 63, back end of 62. Yeah, I think that was a classic. Graham Hill's was a classic. I like John Surtees' Elegance, the white with the light blue tape. Mike Spence, I was always a fan of. Ignacio Giunti was the first. He was one of the first with a full face helmet, but with his full face helmet, he had that incredible Aztec design on the helmet. And when I saw that, I thought, whoa, that is the new world. And so in answer to your question, I quite like modern as well, in the sense that what Giunti was doing was totally new and it looked great. As for today, what I don't like is the constant changing of helmets. I think it's just ridiculous. It's obvious that they're just doing it so that the fans have to go and buy some other badge or whatever, or model helmet, and they're going to make doing it for money. But I think they should be. I think F1 should be much stricter about that, and the drivers' helmets should be. They maybe 2 changes a year, maybe 3 maximum. Same with the cars, really. You can't go around changing the livery of the cars every race dramatically from one color to another. Yes, within limits you can do it, but I think it's the same with the helmets. And if you ask me what helmet design most of these young guys have, I'd have absolutely no idea, because you hardly see it anyway, because of the whole business of the what they look like in the garage with the timing monitors everywhere, and then you just can't see the halo and everything else. And when they're on the track, they're sitting pretty low, and it's quite difficult. If I said to you, what was the difference between Liam Lawson's helmet in race 4 last year and race 9, would you know? I wouldn't. No idea. So yeah, there you go. This is from Kossi Yava. How much more performance can a team find with extra wind tunnel time? For example, Aston has 42% more wind tunnel time than McLaren. How significant is that for development? Well, kind of depends on who's using the wind tunnel, but because it's Adrian Newey in this case, I'd say it's massively significant, and that should not be underplayed. And it's a very good point. I mean, 42% more time for a guy like Adrian Newey is equivalent to about 100% more for any other aerodynamicist. So it's a huge thing. And yeah, I'm sure Adrian's made very good use of that. It's a big deal, that. And it's not only wind tunnel, it's also CFD, isn't it? Hey Pete, my main man, how's it hanging? That's Warland. I'm very good, thank you. JPS 78, good morning, Peter. When I first saw this year's cars, the front movable wing reminded me of Jim Hall's wing chaparral Can-Am cars. Was there a time when the Can-Am cars were faster than Formula One cars? Yeah, absolutely. That hasn't come up because there's a slight freeze. Oh yeah, it's come up now. Yeah, absolutely. And nobody cared about it. They just thought, wow, Can-Am cars are mega. And Formula One drivers would go over there and do Can-Am, and they were blown away by how quick they were. And they were also earning money as well, prize money, which they never got in Formula One. So that was great. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. The Chaparral was super quick in 67. Mike Spence, Phil Hill, and before that. And yet it wasn't until 1968 that Formula One eventually thought, oh, maybe we should put wings on the cars. It's incredible, isn't it? I did ask Colin Chapman at the time. I did ask Colin why it took him so long to adapt, bearing in mind the trend that Jim Hall had shown the world. And he said, oh, well, because it was all, they were considered, they worked because the Can-Am cars were so quick and they had big engines and it's a different formula. They were heavier, and we just felt in Formula One that it wasn't going to be appropriate. And then we realized that we were wrong. It was kind of that, it was just like, oh, well, that's what they're doing in sports cars. That'll never work in Formula One. Nobody ever really in Formula One took it that seriously. It's astonishing when you think about it today and you see how quick the Chaparral was and how good it was. Just amazing. Yeah, Jim Hall, one of my all-time heroes. Chaparral, one of my all-time favorite cars. The logo, the font, everything about them. The wheels, those spoked wire wheels they had, and yeah, nothing bad about Chaparral. Just everything about it was just brilliant. And Jim Hall, of course, very quick driver in his own right, to the point where he did Formula One in a Lotus 24. That's how much he wanted to be a racing driver and was a racing driver. And then he went back and started Chaparral. But there he was, like Roger Penske, just a race driver. That's how it all started for those guys. Great show, Peter. Thank you very much, Jamie. It's always nice to know that. Not in terms of having a compliment, but nice to know that in theory the sound and the camera and everything's working, and the chat box thing is working. So that's good. Watching from Bangladesh, Peter, big fan. That's great. Thank you very much. Welcome from Bangladesh. And let's hope one day we get an Indian Grand Prix back on the calendar. Not that it's Bangladesh, but it'd be a bit nearer for you, wouldn't it? Rao 5160. If Oscar gets beaten this year, would he start to look like the second driver, e.g. Massa, Bottas? You mean if he gets beaten by Lando? Well, I think because the people behind Oscar would make it, if it's going that way and Lando's looking like he's going to beat Oscar, well, it depends, doesn't it? I mean, if neither of them are going to be world champion, I don't think it really matters. But on the assumption that what you're really asking about is if Lando is heading towards a second world championship and Oscar's getting beaten for a second time, I think there are enough big wheels behind Oscar's career to get the message out loud and clear that they think Oscar isn't getting the right treatment, and if he had been in Lando's position, he'd be winning the championship. I think that message will come out loud and clear. I think they're keeping fairly low profile at the moment, obviously see how it goes, but I think that's what we will be told. And that's probably what Oscar will think, I would imagine. In my opinion, I think he's got a really good chance to win the world championship this year, assuming the McLaren is a quick car, which is, I think, it's almost a given that it will be. And that I think he will beat Lando, because I think Lando, I just think Lando will not be quite the Lando that he was last year, back end of last year, now that he's won a championship. I think Oscar will be the hungry driver out there, capitalizing on how good that McLaren potentially will be, albeit I'm not sure he will have reached his own potential because this bears up my point. I think if you are Lando with Daniel Ricciardo, you become the best driver you possibly can. You're not that affected by what Daniel's doing. But when Oscar's in the other car, he was looking at what Oscar was doing a lot and where Oscar was quicker. And when Lando started to go quicker than Oscar, it was the same thing for Oscar. His driving, if you like, was reduced to the level of Lando, and where he was quicker or slower than Lando rather than Max Verstappen, which is what potentially Oscar Piastri could still do if he wasn't concerned about having to beat Lando. If you get my point, it sounds a bit convoluted, but what I'm trying to say is that if Oscar put Lando out of his mind and just thought about how am I going to make my corners a bit shorter, how am I going to work on a little bit more perfection with my right foot on acceleration, how am I going to do this under braking, how am I going to do that, and thought about his own driving a bit more, then I think he could potentially touch the sky. I think he's really good. But at the moment, as it finished last year, I don't think he was there. He wasn't going in that direction. Let's see if he is this year. Do you think, this is from Jamie, do you think Ferrari should be allowed to cheat? I'm no fan of them, but understand they're good for the sport. I'm thinking Monza specials of old. Well, that's the trouble with having a third party commercial rights holder in there, isn't there? Because if you put the teams together and said, as Bernie used to say, look, we all know we need Ferrari. Without Ferrari, we ain't going to get this, we ain't going to get that. We're going to have to do something to help them a bit. What are we going to do? Charlie, we got any ideas? It would be that sort of thing. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But today, there's no way Stefano Domenicali could go to the front, go to the teams, to a team meeting to which Ferrari was not invited, and say, we got to do something to help Ferrari because it's good for the business. What do you guys suggest? What we should let them get away with? They would just laugh him out of the room, because A, most of the teams think they're just as important as Ferrari these days, and B, you can't be seen to be doing that anymore. It's too visible. So that's what happens. If Bernie was still running it, I'm sure he would be thinking that way. But when I say Bernie running it, it doesn't have to specifically be Bernie. But if it was still being run in that sort of autocratic way, then somebody could say, yeah, give him a helping hand, But no, it'll never happen now. Never. Not with commercial rights holders running the sport. It might if the teams are running the sport with the FIA, as per that press release I showed you at the start of the show from the truck racing thing. George Patras. Oh, it's a super chat. Well, it's just good morning from Canada. Thank you very much, Frosty. Very kind for that super chat. Kind. George Patras. Good day, Peter. Love your work. In 2022, McLaren and Alpine were closely matched mid-tier rivals. One shot to the top and the other plummeted to the bottom. How do you think this happened? Well, obviously management, and to some extent engines. It was a big thing for Zach Brown to go from free Honda engines to paying 30 million odd to become a Mercedes customer. Big thing. And it took a while to get that to run smoothly, but then within a year or two it was, as it would be with a nice customer engine like a Mercedes. So McLaren could then focus on various things, and they got their new tunnel going and good people, and yeah, Rob Marshall, a lot of good people from Red Bull. Very good team, very well run, very good team. The Alpine story is more sad. Lots of politics going on, putting two French drivers together, and then Alpine not really knowing where they're going managerially, future of the company, is the engine any good or not, get rid of the engine for 26, put Merc in. Everything was messy, and a lot of good people had left, as distinct from a lot of good people joining Alpine. So there was the difference. And all that comes down to poor management, actually. I think the minute they let Otmar Szafnauer go, there was a decline in the way Alpine were moving forward. I mean, Otmar's not the only guy on the grid with a relatively clear head and a logical thinking brain, but he does have that, and he has a lot of experience these days. And although he may not have been up to speed in some areas compared with other team owners or runners or principals, whatever you want to call it, team managers, he definitely had a lot of very strong points. And for him just to be dismissed like that, and then he's been replaced by Flavio, who's, I don't know, I don't think he has much clue these days of what he's doing. So that explains it all, really. It's just poor decisions from the top. Very disappointing, really, that Alpine didn't have better people to get the thing on the straight and narrow. And today, Alpine's future really is in the hands of, obviously the Mercedes customer engine now, but that'll take a little bit of time to sort out. And then you've got really Pierre Gasly, who's very good, very bright, very intelligent, able to get a few good people in there and make suggestions managerially and push for things. But there's only so much he can do when you've got Flavio running the team. And, I don't know how much power they'll give Pierre Gasly in that sense. But I've got a lot of time for Pierre beyond being just a racing driver. I think he's a very bright guy, and I hope they realise the gem that they have there. Jamie, what do you think of DC? Mika had him in qualifying, but races look closer. Yeah, DC, very quick, very good. Always good friends with DC. I wouldn't have said he was a short corner driver, but then I wouldn't have said he was a long corner driver either. I put him in the sort of Daniel Ricciardo area. I think had he, a bit like Daniel, I think had he at a relatively early stage of his career started to understand the dynamics of what a driver like Max does today, I think DC could have got to a much higher level. But he in the end, I think Mika's sheer natural flair and talent, relatively long corner driver, just overwhelmed him in terms of pace. And yes, he was able to do a lot in the race. Intelligent racer, still very fast, obviously, very competitive. But I think in terms of progressing as a driver, I think he was just overwhelmed by Mika. And it's sad, really. It's a bit like potentially what might happen to Oscar Piastri. If he doesn't get out of this, I've got to beat Lando thing, or I'm getting screwed by McLaren thing, and he just thinks about Oscar Piastri becoming as good as Max Verstappen, which I think he could do. He could go the same way as DC, and that's a shame, because you've got to find a way of developing as a driver. And DC, very good. Very good. I mean, he certainly turned in earlier than Damon Hill, that's for sure. And, that battle he had with Michael, when was that? I don't know, 2000 Manicourt, I think. Amazing win for DC. Fabulous. And yeah, just, very good drivers. I think in a way, a little bit overmanaged and a bit too much thought going on, maybe a bit too intelligent. I don't know, whatever the right phraseology is. But there was a time when we were doing quite a lot of work with DC. I say we, Rob Wilson, but I'd introduce him to Rob. And it great results. And DC just loved it all. And I remember him after one Grand Prix when he had a very good result saying, I was just thinking of Rob every lap, every corner, and what he would be saying. And then, his manager came along and said, oh, this is all a load of rubbish. Let's stop all this. And that was it. And I don't think he got any better after that. In fact, I think he went downhill a bit after that. So it's a shame. Hi, Peter. With some teams, there's some D-dub. Hi, Peter. With some teams mounting their front wings to the second element, is it in the rules to move the first and third element to the straight line mode? I think. Thank you. I'm not exactly sure. I think only the third element, I think, now, if they do that. I may be wrong, but I think it's that. We need to get Scarbs to answer that one. And see if I can do a very quick sort of thing here where I cut that out. Probably can. Yeah, it'll work. And we'll get on to that one. But as I said, to me, that mounting on the second element is potentially a thing to create some bit more flex on the front wing anyway. Love the new background, says Frosty. Thank you very much. Still having a few growing pains with it, but it's getting there. Thank you very much. Retro Gamer finished Peter's last stream while cooking dinner. Straight into this one. Good. Oh, I wonder what you're cooking for dinner. I'm sure I'll be very envious of whatever you're doing there. Extreme BHP. Hi, Peter. Don't you think that flexi wings would be rather considered for this season as opposed to active arrow? Well, it's a good point. I mean, as I said at the start of the show, I think you're going to see some flexi wing stuff going on from some teams that have thought it through better than others because they got 42% more wind tunnel time, maybe. But yeah, you're right. There's so much going on with the active arrow, the flexi wings, the boost, the this, that, too much. Let's make it just the drivers. Why can't we just have it the drivers driving the racing cars? Why do they have to have all these additional things? What are the indentations on the sides of the nose of the AMR 26? Thanks. There's another one I'm going to have to ask Scarbs about. I'll either get back to you on these at the next live stream. I think I will now because I can do this. It's quite cool how I can do that. I'm just copying that question and we'll do that. Diego says, good day from Madrid. Hi, Diego. Thanks very much for all your help and support. I think you're going to be taking some really nice pictures for us in Bahrain, are you not? Looking forward to that. I think Scarb's going to give you a shopping list. So that'll be good for everybody. Sebastian Penisi. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. For you and the family are well. Yes, thank you very much. Greetings from Tacoma, Washington. It's 2 a.m. here. Well, thank you very much for being up. It's probably much too late for you still to be up. But anyway, thank you for that, Sebastian. Very kind from Tacoma, Washington. Zishan Afsar, how competitive do you think Hajar will be this year? Is there any way he avoids the second Red Bull RBR curse? Absolutely he will, and I think he'll be very competitive. He'll be as competitive as that Red Bull will allow him to be based on Max Verstappen being in the other car, not necessarily because Red Bull are going to give all the treatment to Max, which is what a lot of the puerile comments are all about, but because Max is so good. He's the best racing driver in the world. So, Isaac Hajar is not going to beat him over a season. He might out-qualify him periodically. He might outrace him a couple of times, but he isn't going to beat him over a season, no chance. But Hajar will be much closer to Max, in my opinion, than any teammate Max has had since Daniel Ricciardo. You could say, oh, what about Perez? He beat him. Well, I suppose I should say Perez then. Yeah, okay. Since Perez. Aman Chowdhury says, I'm really happy DRS is gone. But we've got active arrow. Anyway, there you go. Retro Gamer again. Peter, will teams sandbag right up before qualifying one, or do they realise they have a better overall package than rival teams? My dark horse is Alonso with Aston Martin. Yeah, you're absolutely right with Alonso, as I've been saying at least for the last 6 months, or basically ever since Adrian went there, that's your dark horse. And I hope a lot of people, if you're a betting type, I hope you followed my advice and put lots of money on Fernando 2 or 3 months ago when the odds would have been good. I don't think sandbagging. I think more important will be for the teams to really try to understand what they've got and what they can do with it, how they manage the power harvesting, how they manage the active arrow, how they manage the boost to overtake, how they manage the tires, how they manage the electrics, how they manage the power unit, the torque, so many things. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're thinking, oh, we better sandbag, because there's so many variables out there. And I think you'll see one day one team will be super quick, and it'll be because they're running the car flat out on the straight as quickly as they can go, or doing something else that nobody else is doing that day. Then somebody else will be super quick. But by the end, if you start putting it all together, there will be a pattern, I think. But we shouldn't take too much store in what is happening on a daily basis for the reasons I've just said, I think. Yeah, TQ4 says DRS is still there. It's just available for all now, front and rear. Hey, Peter in chat, says Max Flash Art. Welcome, Max. Good regular. And we got another super chat. Hi, Peter. What can you tell us about sustainable fuels in Barcelona? It said that few teams use them. Do you know anything about this? Well, yeah. I mean, I was talking about that at the start of the show, and I think, sorry, I missed that. It's not coming up for some reason. Let's try it again. I think the reason for that, we don't know for sure, but I think the reason could be that if you're a midfield team, at the moment, there's not much of it around, that synthetic fuel. A, and B, it's unbelievably expensive. So, it's something that you might want to say, well, if the power unit is working well on the dyno with the fuel, we don't need to worry about that. We'll just do this. It's more simple. We'll save a bit of money, and it's difficult to get anyway. It might stop us half a day for half a day. And And so I think it was that, but we don't know for sure, do we? Just a few stories at the moment. Dan Thompson says, "Hi Peter. So many times he said that Ferrari should have signed Newey. Do you think they should have offered him a stake?" Well, I don't know what was on the table for Adrian to join Ferrari. There was certainly enough for him to be very interested, and I don't know whether he's got a stake in Aston. I guess he probably has. I know that when he left Williams, one of the reasons was he wasn't offered a stake in Williams, but then not sure he had a stake at McLaren, did he? I think if you want Adrian, you have to say this is going to involve not only Adrian coming, but a lot of people that he's going to want to work with as well. So it's going to involve redundancies on our side, but new people coming in. But it's all going to be for the better because he's going to create a great car and we're going to win world championships. Now, if we want to give Adrian 10% of that success as well, let's do it. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's a private company at the end of the day, the Formula One team. It seems to me a no-brainer that you would do that. And if Ferrari said, we want Adrian, we're happy to pay him $10 trillion, but we're not going to give him 1% of the company because it's ours, we're never going to sell it, then that's just stupid thinking. And obviously I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. Why would you think that way? Why not give the guy a percentage of the company if he's the engineer making it all happen? In the same way Frank gave a lot of the company to Patrick Head in 77 when he rebooted the team, because he realized really for the first time that the key to success in Formula One was the engineering, and therefore he was going to make Patrick an almost equal partner. And what's wrong with that? That's what Formula One is all about. All these stakeholders they always have. That's completely ludicrous. What you want to have is Adrian Newey. He's much more important than any stakeholder. Abhishek Karanjan says, "Thank you for being the best overall sports journalist of the world and sure the best Formula One pundit and in the world, Peter. Love listening to your feel for different sports." Oh, thank you very much. It's very kind. I'm completely useless on many sports, so don't ask me about those. I've got a reasonable feel for tennis and golf and a few others, but thank you very much. Very kind. Max Flashart, wheels have to pass crash testing for homologation, I thought. Yeah, I'm sure they do. Yeah, I'm sure they do. There's no doubt about that. And the wheels are all standard wheels, so you could never get away with doing your own lightweight wheel. And all I'm thinking was that if they didn't have that rule, most of the cynics would immediately say, "Oh, let's run." They would, for sure. They'd run lightweight wheels for the first or two stints of the race, wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? It's what racing's all about. If you're going to go 3/10 quicker with this, but it might fail, do you want it or not? Any race driver is going to say, "Yeah, give me the 3/10." Well, they should do if they're race drivers. Dan Thompson, 53. "I was in a similar position, had to set up my own company in order to benefit from what I believed I deserved." Well, yeah, there you go. And it's, if Adrian owned some of Ferrari, would that be wrong? If there was a new edition of a Ferrari, would that be a bad thing? No, of course it wouldn't. It would be brilliant. I just don't understand why they didn't hire him. They had everything there to make it attractive for Adrian. They could easily have allowed him still to operate from the UK if that's what he wanted to do. Just set up a big design studio for him in Sunningdale, wherever he lives, as they did for John Barnard in Surrey, and do it that way. All you need is his brain and his drawings, and then get him on the pit wall. It's not as simple as that, I know, but you get my gist. Whatever it took, they should have done it. Max Flashart says, "Lotus Elands are as light as..." I'm trying to see what... He doesn't finish the sentence, but they are light, and that's beautiful. Lightweight, agility, nimble. Yeah, not very good in an accident, but the whole point of an Elan, as Colin Chapman used to say, was that it gives the nimbleness and the agility of the Elan gives you more chance of avoiding the accident. I can hear you all laughing there, saying, yeah, right. EE55, "When did you first notice Fernando?" I remember him watching the final stage of qualifying. I remember watching the final stage of qualifying during the 24 Qatar Grand Prix and was wowed by him. 24? No, I was aware of Fernando when he was winning, was it Nissan World Series or Nissan something or other? I think it was Nissan, before he was signed for Minardi. But I saw his first race in a Minardi and he was just brilliant straight away. It was obvious how good he was. And the obvious thing about Fernando, as I say, was that ability just to have the car sitting square on the road at any particular point of the corner, apart from the initial turn in. And it was just beautiful to watch straight away. You could see it. It was so obvious. Um, Zishan Afsar. Hi, Peter. What's the biggest challenge Cadillac faced this season? Uh, it's a good question. Well, or is it a good question? I mean, in my opinion, if I was running Cadillac, I would say the biggest problem we've got, guys, is that everyone will have low expectations for us. And it's very easy to think that the success in Formula One that we want is going to be achieved one day at a time, slowly, slowly catch the monkey. That isn't it. We need to be aiming high, and we need to be pushing hard, and we need to be absolutely self-critical at every given moment. And the problem we've got, I know, guys, this is me talking to the shop floor, is that we got two drivers, neither of whom are super quick and neither of whom are in the upslope of their careers. So the odds are those guys are going to be wanting a car that's relatively easy to drive, as distinct from a super quick car that's nervous and on the edge, but nonetheless starting to be quite quick. So we need to build all of that into our input and understanding of where we're going. And yes, we should have Colton Herta in the car sooner rather than later, because we definitely going to want to race him in 27, because we need some, if we believe in him, and which I do. He's super quick, but he needs a lot of time. We got to help. We got to make that happen, because he's going to be the guy that's going to start stretching this car. Otherwise, it's just going to be too easy to, to fall into a pattern of qualifying near the back. And if we finish a race, we'll all think it's wonderful. That's not what we want. That's what I would be saying. I'm sure to some extent they're saying that, and to other extent they're probably saying, everything, we're a big company, everything will happen. We need to make sure it all happens in the same time, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. That's how I would approach it. It's just me. And I would somehow bring Mario in to fire everybody up in a regular way as well. And I don't know if they're doing that. As I keep saying, I actually had a dream last night about the whole scenario, Cadillac, and why Mario wasn't involved. It was ridiculous. It's on my mind. I don't understand why they're not using Mario more. River JR Riv. Where do you think teams will spend most of the development budget under the 26 regs? Energy management, aero efficiency, mechanical grip? And which of those do you think the FIA is underestimating? Well, I think if you put out the budget element, I think that in general, we from the outside are probably underestimating the importance of energy management more than anything else at the moment. There's not that much talk about it. There's a lot of talk about aero, a lot of talk about torque and various other things, but energy management is how you actually manage that in the course of a lap, and therefore a race, I think is going to be very important. Now, whether that has more of an impact, a development budget impact, than any of the other elements, I think the only one there that really has a real impact on the development budget is aero efficiency. And if it's clear that in order to be competitive and to win a race, you've got to have the front wing system that Mercedes have got, then that's quite a big chunk out of your development budget for aero gone. And so, but energy management is more down to the way you run the car and the driver and the way the engineers are running the car. And that's a really big thing. And I think I was talking to Mark about this, and he'll talk about it a lot more when he's on the show live, but he was pointing out that in his opinion, the guy leading the race potentially has got more opportunity now to walk away with the race from the opposition, because he can manage his energy in a salient way that is relevant to the lap, as distinct from racing against others in the midfield, which will have the effect a bit like being in a DRS train, that everybody's basically doing the same thing and they all nullify one another. Whereas if you've got a gap and you're in front, you can just disappear. And we may see actually much bigger winning margins than ever before. That's just a train of thought potentially that could happen. So mechanical grip, that's Well, I mean, what you haven't really got in there is how drivers and teams will be working with the active aero, and how many drivers are going to want a little bit more wing at a certain place compared with others who can get the wing out a little bit sooner because they're going straighter sooner, as we talked about in the live stream last week. And again, that's not really a development budget thing. That's just a management thing. So, yeah. So Sebastian again. Hi, Peter. I know for drag racing, they use methane fuel, alcohol as a fuel, but because it doesn't have as much energy per liter, do you need to have more? You need to burn more fuel to get the same amount. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference in the way they're going to be running the fuel this year, obviously, and methanol. It's all going to be bio-based fuel, and some fuel will be more efficient than others, but it'll be tailored to the engine, so it'll be quite difficult to separate it and say, wow, if we put the Aramco fuel in the Ferrari, imagine what the Ferrari would do, or not, whichever way you want to look at it. So that's the only thing about it. It's so integral to the design of the engine that it's going to be quite difficult to have any sort of judgment on that. Drew says, Peter, maybe get a couch better for the back. It's more cozy. Esteban told media that following cars, you lose a lot of front end overtaking. Is that a legit issue? As I say, not all drivers complaining about that. So I think it does open up the thought of some teams already have got flexi front wings and others haven't, I would say. I'd say Mercedes have done a better job with the front wing than most, seemingly, at the moment. So, Kevin Kavora says, Indian government wants Formula One back in India. What do you think? Well, I would love it. And I would, yeah, I mean, the government can afford it. So, well, can they afford it? I don't know. You always have to think about the country and what it's actually like in terms of how the money can best be spent. But I'm sure there are plenty of Indian government officials who would like to see a Formula One race there. And I love to see a race in India again. I really enjoyed that race in Delhi. So Nick Woodbridge says, hi, Peter. I heard a driver coach mentioning that Formula One teams are scared of the image of hiring them and worried about making them wimpy, etc. What do you have to say about that? Well, I think it's true. I think Formula One teams are wary of hiring coaches, and drivers more specifically are wary of driving. It's not really up to the team. It should be up to the driver, not the team, I think. And the team shouldn't have anything to do with it. If the driver wants to work with a coach in his spare time, let him do it. What's the problem? But the problem is drivers don't want to do that, or most of them don't. Lance Stroll does as one, and some of the current grid have also worked with Rob and done very well, but not many of the young guys want to do it because they've never been exposed to it, I suppose, and B, because they think they're in Formula One, kind of made it. And all they've got to learn now is everything they've got to learn will come from racing, from the engineers, and from their more experienced teammate. It won't be, how can I actually improve my use of the throttle, pedal, steering, brakes? It won't be that. And that's a shame. But it's racing drivers. It's sort of an extension of the whole racing driver thing, which there are always a million things to blame. Unlike a tennis player or a golfer or a footballer, you miss the goal. You can't really blame the goalpost. You can't really blame the ball. You can't really blame the shoes or the ambient temperature. But in motor racing, you can blame the engine, the tires, the brakes, the aero, the chassis, the fuel, the power. You can blame engineer. You can blame about 9 things before it comes down to you actually not doing a very good job. And they do. That's how they do it. They've been doing that since karting, probably. Drew says, Peter, why do we call the AMR26 the Newey car? His is not the only one. He is not the only one that made a contribution. We don't call them MCL 40, the Rob car. I just feel it's disrespectful to the other engineers. Oh no, it's not disrespectful to the engineers, because Newey implies Newey and his team of very good people that he works with. The painful thing is calling it Aston Martin, really, because what's it got to do with Aston Martin? And they're using a Honda engine. So, and the whole car wouldn't be the way it is if it wasn't for Adrian Newey. So if you're going to choose one name for the car, the most obvious name to call it is the Newey car. And that's it. What do you want to call it? An Aston Martin? Come on, give me a break. If you talk about Aston Martin, what do we think of? We think about the team that signed Jim Clark and they never raced him because when everybody was going to rear engines, they built a front engine Formula One car. Okay, slightly different team today, slightly different company today. I'm being facetious, but do you really want to? I don't really want to. I'm so impressed with everything that Adrian has done with that car and that team of people that he has to work with there, that I'm quite happy to call it the Newey car. That's it. Finton Mains, soft skills. Tommy Byrne, abrasive personality, unbelievable talent. Never got to Formula One because of this. Eddie Jordan said he was the best driver not to get to Formula One. Well, that's another good example. Yeah, I don't think Tyler Alexander liked Tommy when he ran him in that McLaren Formula One test at Silverstone. And Tommy said to me after that test that, he knew he wasn't going to get any drive out of it from the minute he sat in the car, long before he even left the track. But did he have an abrasive personality? I never saw Tommy as an abrasive personality at all. I saw him as a very, very like Derek Daly, lovely guy, always laughing, joking, great personality. So to me, he would fit in very well with any existing Formula One team, because I would say he's got quite a soft in the sense that it's a non-racing thing, personality that works. John Hill says, if Formula One was only about the fastest drivers, then most of the drivers today wouldn't be there. There's a lot of very fast drivers who are not in Formula One, that's true. But I do think, I don't know, I can't think of anybody quicker than Max or Charles, really, who's not in Formula One right now. But having said that, yeah, there are plenty of make weights, that's for sure. Yeah. So long as a guy like Max has made it, then we can rest in peace, can't we? Left Eris 2583. The hero of teen years was Riccardo Patrese, coolest guy in Formula One. Well, that's an interesting observation. He was a cool guy, Riccardo. Really nice guy. Very easy to get on with, and love life. Love racing. Loved everything about it. And from model trains, which I used to talk to him a lot about, which I love as well, to where he lived in Italy, Padova, to his love of pasta and bread, and what his kids were doing as they were growing up. Susie, I mean, just lovely and great guy. First person I ever saw wearing Todd's shoes as well, driving shoes. Hey, the Todd's very good shoes. You go to the shop in Milan, you tell him Riccardo, he sent this to you. I did. Great guy. A perfect number 2 to Nigel as well. Quick enough to win Grand Prix. Bit like Riccardo Patrese alongside, a bit like Daniel Ricciardo would have been alongside Lando Norris. Ricciardo against Nigel. It was similar balance, I think. Peter, why the underhand digs at Lewis? In your last live chat, you kept going on about how he's not doing the things you expect him to do. He's not like you and does not have to be. Let the man be. Well, that's an interesting point of view, I suppose. I mean, somebody asked me a question, how it was along the lines of, how should Lewis be preparing for this year, or can he beat Charles? And I said, this is how I think Lewis should prepare. Now, it's just my opinion. And I know that Lewis isn't going to do that. I know he's different from every other driver, let alone just somebody that thinks like me. And so, but I don't see the problem in that. Why do you think just let the man be? What does that mean? I don't understand your comment there. If you let him be, fine, I am letting him be. I'm not actually imposing anything on him. I'm just saying, that's, in my opinion, that would be the right way to approach it, would be to get rid of all the crud, the excess crud he's got in his life, and to focus 100% on being a Ferrari driver in Italy, getting to know everybody in the team backwards, and eat, sleep, drink Ferrari Formula One driver in Maranello. That's basically what I said, and I stand by that 100%. I think that'd be the right way to go. He's done everything else, and he doesn't need any more of the distractions. Now, if the Ferrari is a good car, I've also said, and don't ever misquote me on this, that for sure he will win races again. I have no doubt about that if he changes nothing. All I'm saying is, in order to maximize the opportunity that he has right now and to minimize all the variables, that streamlined, absolutely focused approach would be the one that I think would work best. It's like saying, I think Max would be better off in a Mercedes if the Red Bull isn't going to win. I mean, what's the difference between that and what I said about Lewis Hamilton? So thank you very much. 12th dimension. Hi, Peter. Do you think the Aston will be a better, faster car than the Red Bull this season? I don't know yet. It's far too early to say that. And I don't think anybody knows that. On paper, at the moment, it looks as if it is, but it's a very, very early stage. And Red Bull are quite capable of responding very quickly. So I wouldn't go too far down that road at the moment. Shana Marasinghe. I genuinely think Ferrari will be consistently on top this season. What do you think? And how do you think the team will handle the situation like last year with McLaren? Well, if Ferrari is genuinely on top, which means winning a lot of races and potentially finishing first and second in the championship, I don't think they'll do a better job than McLaren at handling the two drivers, and they'll be pretty closely matched. I suspect Charles will have a better shot at having more points over 24 races than Lewis, because he probably will qualify better than Lewis. But if it's a very good car, you should never count out Lewis and his ability suddenly to be Lewis Hamilton again. And I suspect if it is a very good car, he will be the Lewis that we saw in 21, and we'll be able to get a lot out of that car. But don't expect Fred or John Alcon or anybody to have any ability at all to control the racing between the two. And don't forget, there's nobody dirtier, is that the right word? There's nobody less clean on the grid in terms of trackcraft than Charles Leclerc. And that does Lewis know that? He's probably, the Charles he's seen is probably pretty tough, but he probably, that's probably what he thinks. But, I can tell you now, Charles is absolutely no prisoners at all. If it comes down to wheel with Lewis Hamilton, it'll be just like, Lewis will be shocked, I think, at what Charles will do. And Lewis is one of the cleanest drivers I've ever seen, and that'll be a big difference between the two of them. Good day from down under. Alien's going to get, yeah, good name. Thank you very much. Trail Break 3. Hi, Peter. Hope the new year is kind to you. It is indeed. Thank you very much. Have you heard that Mr. Ross Brawn will be working with Ferrari on race strategy? No, I haven't. Sounds complicated, doesn't it? I think Ferrari's problem is they've got too many people doing strategy at the moment. They need to simplify it, don't they? Anyway, Ross would probably be pretty good if he's doing it on his own or just with a couple of his own mates. Does that mean on the pit wall in the garage, or does that mean remotely? So, whatever you look at it, it sounds a bit complicated to me. So there you go. What do you think of the new Aston, says Mariam? I love the new Aston. I think it looks beautiful. And as Scarbs very eloquently said, it looks like a car that's been properly designed from front to rear. So there we go. Greg Peer, Honda, Alonso, and Newey for the win this year. It's almost too perfect. It's interesting how people are starting to really get behind that whole thing now. You would never have seen a post like that 3 months ago, but now they've seen the Newey car, and I think people are starting to realize that it is going to be very, very good. Having said that, Mercedes are going to be incredibly strong throughout the year. There's no doubt about that. And George Russell still has to be the most likely driver to win the World Championship this year, in my opinion. And we should never count out, obviously, Red Bull and Max and what they might be doing now in response to what they've seen already in the Bahrain test. Very early days. Mariam again. Do you think Cadillac and Audi can act in the shape of a Formula One team? Well, they both got their specific problems, and we've talked a bit about Cadillac, and I think they'll be sort of, no pressure on us. Aren't we great just to be here? Super Bowl launch, wonderful. blah, 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 without much Mario in there. And Audi will be a very good race team because that's what they are and have been for a long time with Sauber, stroke Alfa Romeo, whatever they were. And Audi coming in a strange way, really, at a strange time, doing an engine that really they should be getting very much on top of from day one, because the FIA have agreed to their request to get the MGUH taken off the spec, which suits Audi down to the ground. So no excuses there. And in theory, they should be able to design a pretty good car because they've got reasonable building blocks from the Sauber thing. So no real excuse at Audi. Certainly they shouldn't be saying it's going to take us 4 or 5 years. That's for sure. You know, if they're not, they should be aiming at being reasonably quick by mid-season. There we go. Right, let's go around. Trailbreak says Checo Perez has stated that his time as Max Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull was the worst job in Formula One, alleging that the team was built exclusively around Verstappen. Well, you know what I think about that, so I'm not even going to respond this time. I mean, Perez is so wide of the mark there that it's not even worth, you know, it's like, I don't know. I'm speechless when I see things like that. Bucky Nick, how will the Formula One teams increase fuel energy concentration? What 16.1 compression sounds like a diesel engine, and diesel has more energy than petrol. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting battle, isn't it? And the whole engine side of it, the normal power unit side of it, is one thing, and then you've got the electrification on the other. And Scarbs is saying it's now effectively 5347, and it's a pretty small fuel tank as well, but it's still producing quite a lot of power. And of course, in answer to one other question, actually, which is in the other live stream, why there's more talk now about potentially getting around the compression ratio thing, it's because they reduced the compression ratio from 25 to 26. In 25 and up to 25, it was always measured at ambient temperature, as it is now. But coming down from 18 to 16 is a different thing. And people looking for, engineers presumably looking for ways of getting around that. As soon as you change a rule, engineers immediately think, oh, how can we get around that rule? So they change the compression ratio. How can we get around that? And they're doing a good job, aren't they? Greg Peer, Verstappen, Alonso, Newey team seems fairly likely at this point. What do you think? Well, I imagine Newey's pretty much tied to Aston Martin, isn't he? To the Strolls. And if he's tied to the Strolls, that means he's tied to Lance. And so that only gives him one seat to play around with. So if Verstappen's going to drive for Adrian, then it's Alonso out, and that you can imagine that end of 26 probably. If Max isn't going very well in the Red Bull, that's where he's going to want to go. And Alonso, I mean, as I say, if he's won the World Championship, he'd probably be happy to retire, and if he hasn't won the World Championship, he'd probably be annoyed, so he'd probably retire as well. So yeah, I think Verstappen, Newey, pretty likely if the Red Bull isn't very good. But we don't know yet. James Allabone. Hi, Peter. I've seen you chat with Cameron and you have brought up James Hunt a few times now. Do you have any memories of James that you think of fondly? Well, I've talked to a few incidents, that one in Canada when he said, I must get my man to start my engine. And he walked onto the grid and got his man to start his engine on his McLaren M23 and then won the Canadian Grand Prix, which was instrumental into winning the 76 World Championship. And it all began with that sort of Spitfire pilot type comment, my man. I mean, I was talking to him about driving once, and he did say, my grandmother could drive from apex to exit on opposite lock without a problem. The key to Grand Prix driving is entry to apex. That's what it's all about. And I've always had a lot of respect for his grandma as a result. And I actually met her once as well, old Grandma Hunt. And she lived in Sutton in Surrey, in the big house the Hunts had there. And the story goes that when she was carried out, sadly, on a stretcher, when she left us, the Bertram, I think it was. Anyway, it's a name. It began with a B. James's African grey parrot, of which he was very fond, said, "Well, you can go then. You can go then." As she was being carried out, and James used to laugh, double up with laughter, saying that. And James is very fond of birds, and he had a big set of budgerigars in later life in his house in Wimbledon, and used to talk to them. I guess they talked to him, and he certainly talked about them a lot to us. And he also used to talk about his A30 van that he had towards the end as well, which he had around London in. Incredible fuel consumption. Park it anywhere. Don't mind if somebody hits it. He was just wonderful, James. And to me, it was. We lost David Hunt. Similar thing. Just suddenly a heart problem, and a lot of people said, well, the way he lived his life and everything. But I've had it on very good authorities from the medics that was it. Regardless of how James had lived his life, that was his heart was never going to last any longer than that. I guess it was the same with David as well, because he was one of the healthiest guys I knew. And yeah, and he taught his dog Oscar to stop panting when he began the takeaway on the golf swing. So as James started the takeaway, Oscar would be next to him, his German Shepherd. And as soon as he saw the club move, he'd stop panting, James would hit the ball, and then he'd hair off and find the ball or chase after the ball, or not. If James said no, stay, he would stay. Incredibly well trained dog. And as a result of that, he was the only dog ever allowed on Sunningdale Golf Course during play, because he had respect for the takeaway of the club, all created by James Hunt. Brilliant. Vinizena. Hi, Peter. My question is, if the high rake will be back. I think that's not too high like 21, but what do you think about it? Yeah, well, Scarb's talked about that a little bit already, and it looks like some teams are going in that direction, and we'll see about it. There's quite a lot of faffing around with front suspension layouts as well, isn't there, with anti-dive. We talked about anti-dive. Potentially more important is going to be anti-squat with the amount of torque there is. So, if there's rake, yeah, it's an aerodynamic thing, but I think people are going to be looking at mechanical anti-squat more than rake for aero this year. That's my general feeling already, but I may be wrong on that, obviously. Max Flashart says, talking of driving styles, would you consider doing a video with Martin from Lower Lap Time? I think a lot of people would love to have the drivers outlined. Not familiar with it, but I'm sure he's brilliant. Yeah, I mean, if he wants to make contact, we could possibly do something. Yeah, why not? Review 07. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. Excited about 26. Do you have any suggestions on who to watch to understand the art of short corners and apply it to the sim? Rob is for on-road racing, I assume. Well, Rob's done a lot of work on the sim as well, particularly for some of the teams and helping them set it up. So he's not anti-sim at all. What Rob has said is that the things that I talk about, and he talks about much more eloquently than I, the things that require perfect harmony with the road, perfect rates of input, suppleness, agility, the right amount of energizing the car, the body, all those things are very subtle and impossible to measure digitally. And these things, if applied well, will allow a driver to start creating shorter corners and rotating the car in such a way that he can extend the straight on exit. But how then to apply that to a sim, which requires a digital programming system? That's Rob's problem with sims, that the ultimate difference between Max Verstappen and, say, Isaac Hadjar at the moment won't really be noticeable on a sim, any sim, the best sim in the world. So you could try a different line on a sim using hand-eye coordination, hand-foot coordination, and eye, but it may not mean anything, because what you'll be doing is actually going a bit slower in order to get to that turn-in point that's a little bit earlier, and it won't mean anything. So I don't know how to answer your question, really. To watch and understand, the best thing you can do is book a day with Rob Wilson. If you really want to see it up close and understand how to do it, book a day with Rob. Otherwise, keep reading, keep watching, keep looking. That's all I can say. Um, David Brown says, why is the first Bahrain Formula One test not being live streamed? Well, I didn't know that. And I don't know. I mean, I'm just assuming that I log on to the same Formula One page that I normally log on to, and it'll be there magically. But if it's not, that's not being shown, then we might be in trouble again. I mean, it's ludicrous. Why wouldn't it be? They're probably the expense. I don't know, cost of. But if you got the crew out there and you're going to do the first test, why wouldn't you do the second? If you got the crew out there for the second, why wouldn't you do the first? Just get them out a bit early. It doesn't make any sense to me. So there you go. Yeah, it's silly, isn't it? Let's hope it's there. Max is being very nice about hitting like buttons and everything. I'll stay out of that one. Thank you very much indeed, Max, for that. What are we doing? Ugo, Freddie Slater. Yes, another one. Yeah, mentioned Freddie, I think, didn't we? Like the live in New Zealand, they were great. Yeah. Thanks. DR Droidy says, thanks for the great content. Wish you and your viewers a fantastic Formula One season. Can't wait for lights out in Melbourne. Good. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for that. And I think we're all the same. Yep. More talk about from Alphys de Brassolini, worried about the new fuels. Rumours teams didn't run them at Barcelona. I think some of them didn't run them for the reasons that I've said. I think it's more to do with potentially, if you're back of the grid team, cost. Secondly, availability at this stage of the year. They're very, very difficult, time consuming and expensive to produce. But hopefully everything will be right for Melbourne. Eric Pedersen, thoughts on Oliver Solberg? Well, yeah. I love these questions because Ollie's one of my heroes already. I just love watching him drive, and I first saw him drive in the Skoda Rally 2 in 24, and I was absolutely blown away at how good he was. And I would, you go to a stage and you watch all the Rally 1 cars, and then you watch a couple of Rally 2 cars, and where's Ollie? And then eventually you just stay to watch Ollie Solberg. And once he's there, go away now, go to the next stage. Everything was, I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, he was just Max. Everything was just right. You know, he was never too far out of line, always getting the car rotated exactly the right way. Everything just looks perfect. Everything's always square to the road. Obviously, he makes mistakes. And this is rallying. You know, you can't predict the weather. You can't predict the surface and everything else. You're leaving margin for error. But generally speaking, he's just beautiful to watch as a driver. I'd love to see him in a race car, actually. I really would. He's very good. And yeah, you know, he's as good as they get, really, I would imagine. So I'm already booking several rallies this year just to go and watch Ollie Solberg drive. And you think, well, why are you doing rallies, Peter, and more than Formula One? Because you can actually see them being driven. You can see this skill in a much more graphic way, up close and personal. Nothing wrong with Formula One. It is what it is. But I love seeing rally drivers up close like that. Colton Herder in Formula 2. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he goes. I mean, I think he'll go very well. And his dad, Brian, has got a very good head on his shoulders. Very quick driver in his own right as well. So wish him well, Colton. He's just, the stuff I've seen of him on board in America is just very reflexy, incredible car control. And I think with the head of his dad and just generally the F2 team that he'd be with, I think he'll go pretty well. David Davidson says, haha, I live near Nazareth. Saw that piece with Mario. Well, I'm sure if you're a resident, I got a lot of things wrong in that, but I hope you enjoyed it. But I don't know, I just love suburban, that's the wrong word. I love small town America. I know Nazareth's not a small town, is it? But I love that whole thing, you know, the high street. And there was a sort of hunting, fishing shop there. And I went in and bought a beanie and you know, a thing for your ears for skiing in blue with the N for Nazareth, which I often wear. And I just love the whole Nazareth thing. Why wouldn't anybody in racing would just, for me, Nazareth's, you know, one of the center points should be. So what else? Brian McClendon says, thank you for your insight. I think you're the guy that I didn't get to last time, Brian, but I'm glad. I think I answered your question in the community thing, But here we are now live, so that's great. Thank you for your insight and lending form to my father's Formula One. I started watching in the late 90s. Love to hear the old stories. Oh, you've done the favourite meal. Yeah, I did that one. Whether food or company. Yeah, well, I did that one, and I selected Gilles Villeneuve breakfast, Holiday Inn, Long Beach, 1978, Monday after the race, when he's just led a Grand Prix for the first time, and he's ordered eggs Benedict for us, and Joanne was there too. And we're eating the eggs Benedict, and he's telling me about how he was loading up his luggage that morning to get it down to the lobby, and he put his helmet in the bag, and he looked at the helmet and he realized for the first time that it didn't have rubber or oil on the visor because he was leading. And he thought, what a great thing. Gilles, I really miss Gilles. Also this, hi goat, it's Torfig from Sudan by way of Qatar. So my question, don't you think the FIA should change the current whoever came first to the corner thing to just leave space and we have fair racing? Oh, well, yeah, you're reminding that we have all those stupid rules still, don't we? Oh, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how much they've changed those. I don't know, all that stuff about the line. You can't change line. You can't weave under braking. You can't do this. You can't do that. Not allowed to overtake on the inside anymore. If you're on the outside, you're always going to be protected. Don't get me started. I don't know. Let's just wait and see what happens. But thanks very much indeed, Torfig, for that. So Mariam says, it seems that considering the results of Spain, the game has changed this season. It's still unclear which team is faster. Well, as I said, we're not really going to know, even after Melbourne, I don't think, because quite a lot of stuff will come in and, into play in Melbourne, and people think, oh, that's interesting. Well, how are they going to do that? And then something else will come into play. Then it'll be wet, and it'll be sort of 4 or 5 races before we get a real feel, I think, before what's going on. Max's talent and ability seems to be far ahead of the pack. Have you ever seen someone so exceptional compared to his peers before? And/or is the level of the rest of the pack somewhat lower than usual? I don't think so, no. I don't think... I mean, the standard of driving overall, if you take Max and Charles and Lewis at his peak into account, is very, very high. As high as you'd ever see in the annals of Formula One. Maybe the standard of driving in the midfield is lower than it used to be at some points because it's easier to go off. It's easier to make a mistake and go off and not hit anything. Whereas when you could hit something, you had to work harder at your craft to be quick and not go off. And I think there's a bit too much sort of, just go for it attitude, and therefore not as much attention being paid in developing your driving. And that's one of the reasons that they don't think they need a coach, I guess. It's more about track craft these days in the midfield than it is about actually getting perfect rates of input. So, but going back to your question, let's think about a young driver that came on the scene, exceptional compared to his peers. Well, Emerson Fittipaldi was incredibly young and very inexperienced and incredibly successful and very polished and relatively flawless virtually from day one. So there's one. Ayrton obviously was another. And in my mind, in which I was looking, Nigel Mansell as well. I don't remember Nigel having terrible races. Yeah, he had a few crashes and he had this and that, but he was always demonstrably good given the car he was driving and the quality of the teammates he was comparing himself with and his lack of experience. So in general, I mean, Alan Prost is another. Alan Prost's arrival in Formula One was just incredible. He was so quick even compared with John Watson in the McLaren. McLaren wasn't a good car, but he was, whoa, this guy's really good. And as soon as he got in a Renault, it showed. And so he was another one, I guess. I said, obviously, Ayrton. Michael as well. It was pretty clear Michael was always going to be a world champion from the minute he got near that Jordan. Buff Conrad in question, can Pierre Gasly effectively have a successful career with wins and podiums and avoid being stuck at Alpine? Well, yeah, good question. Because the career, that oh, Father Time marches on, doesn't he? And he's had Alpine. Right now, he's got to be thinking, let's hope Alpine become as good as McLaren. No excuse now. They've got Mercedes engines. It's a big team by most standards, and let's make it happen. The problem will be if they're not very good, and let's say they have the same season as last year, despite having Mercedes engines, what opportunities Gasly might then have. I just can't imagine him getting an offer, sadly, from any of the top 4 or 5 teams, even though he's good enough to justify that. Maybe a Red Bull drive again, maybe, uh, maybe not. Depends on what happens with other drivers and stuff. But if you look at his performances last year in that Alpine, which is obviously a really bad car, there was some of them were outstanding. I mean, he had the number of Q3s he had were just ridiculous. Well, Q3s and Q2s actually. Sometimes it was just major to get that thing into Q2. Hi Peter, J Webb, Jimmy Webb. Hi Peter. I saw Jimmy Webb live in London not so long ago in a lovely little church just off Piccadilly, and he was at the piano, just sang on his own. Great. He's got a book. It's called the Cake and the Rain, I think it's called. Yeah, The Cake and the Rain, after, of course, MacArthur Park. Anyway, getting back to it. Hi, Peter. If the Aston is a title challenger for Alonso, what should we expect from Lance? We've seen in 2020 when the car is under him, he can get podiums and put it on the pole. Absolutely. If the car is a championship challenger, if that Newey car is as good as it should be, Newey car, all right, I'll change it to Aston Martin now if you insist. If the Aston Martin is as good as is that good, then for sure Lance Stroll will be capable of podium finishes. And as I said, brace yourselves. He might well win a Grand Prix if the car is that good. He might well win a Grand Prix. He's not slow, Lance Stroll. He has very slow days, and makes a lot of errors and does stupid things in traffic sometimes. But he is capable, A, of putting together a quick lap in qualifying, and B, these days, he's not stupid. I don't think he can probably manage the power and all that stuff, the energy. They'll instruct him pretty well on that. They'll be on top of that. And he could win a Grand Prix. So be ready. As I say, then we'll be doing all these stats with Corey. Who's the worst driver ever to have won a Grand Prix? Does Lance Stroll overtake, I don't know, Pastor Maldonado or whatever you want to say? Not that I've always said I don't think Pastor was as bad as a lot of people love to make out, and he was actually pretty quick, but probably not a lot better than Lance if I think about it. About the same standard, I would think, in different ways. Mariam again, guys, did Pirelli release the tyre results from the Spanish test? Because these are new cars. The behaviour of the tyres is important now, and the data is lacking. Well, I don't think they released the data, but I'm sure they're looking at the data and they're wondering if they've got it right. Generally speaking, Pirelli have done a pretty good job of keeping the strength of the tyres in harmony with the energy put out by the cars, and it went up astronomically in 25, and Pirelli were on top of that. So I'm assuming they've probably got it right for 26. We'll wait and see. Famous last words. I can't even pronounce your name, but anyway, thank you very much for the question. Peter, to your point about Claude, which is the stupid thinking partner thing that Williams are talking about, it's a marketing gimmick. LLMs cannot think. They're just glorified autocomplete automations. Yeah, well, I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it? The whole thing is ridiculous. And as I say, for them to have this thinking partner and not to know that one of their sponsors had been in Formula One before, it doesn't say much about the thinking partner, does it? Give it an easy task. Oh, by the way, have Barclays ever been in Formula One before? Duh. And they got that wrong. So what else are we doing? I know that's not what they're going to use Claude for, but I mean, just as a tester, you could have used it for that just to make sure, couldn't you? So a lot more questions, guys, and it's already 2 hours into it, and I'm getting a bit whatever. Just want to make sure we've got some. I've got through all the super chats. Hi, Peter. Bring Karun Chandok. Yeah, good GP2 driver, did a couple of F1 races, good friend, known him for a long time, introduced him to Rob Wilson, and he did a good job with Rob, I think. So there you go. Nick Woodbridge says, just on the Karun Chandok thing, what do you make of Karun's statement that Fernando's 2012 season is the most complete season by a driver since Jim Clark? Don't know what to make of that, really. What else is I don't know what to make of it. Hi, Peter. Peter Hughes. Yeah, I saw on YouTube yesterday a German interview with Jimmy Clark the day before he died at Hockenheim. It was very poignant watching, knowing the next day what would happen. Yeah, very upsetting. I can barely watch that. That's an interview done by German TV, which I think Kurt Ahrens had roped Jimmy into going to. Jimmy knew Kurt pretty well. And he just arrived on stage, and they were doing a piece with Kurt about the car and everything. And yeah, you know, it's just Jimmy. Oh yeah, okay, I'll come along. I think they're staying at the same hotel, and yeah, I've got an interview on my channel with Graham Lawrence, the New Zealand driver, very quick New Zealand driver, very polished, and he was driving an F2 McLaren in that Hockenheim F2 race, and he was staying at the same hotel as Jimmy, and he went to the track with Jimmy on Sunday morning, had breakfast together and went to the track together. And that interview's on my channel. Yeah, very difficult to watch that, I find. In fact, I can't watch it, so it's been out for a while, that one. So, yeah, a lot of questions here. Norman Kaiser, love your chat show, Peter. Of course, the saddest moments in our favourite sport is when a driver loses his life. But what other moments were sad for you? Korea 2010, left-hand tyre, Lewis Hamilton tyre in China. Yeah. I mean, you can't ask somebody who's been around as long as I about what other sad moments there are beyond drivers losing their life, because I've seen marshals killed, mechanics in the pit lane, marshals on the track, and all of it is horrendous. And that's why I always come down on the side of, yeah, but if it's safety, this is for safety, let's do it. And anything to make racing as safe as possible, I will always endorse 100%. And I still say that the most dangerous part of the racetracks today are the straights, because that's where there's not a lot of runoff area built into it, because they're the straights. And on top of that, the cars are traveling at incredibly high speed. And guess what? We're going for even higher speeds in 2026, which I'm not a proponent of at all. I think it's the wrong way to go. And we've seen in relatively recent past incidents of cars interlocking wheels on the straight, touching wheels on the straight. Most recently, Charles and Lewis at Barcelona. But beyond that, Lance Stroll with Fernando, Lance Stroll with Sebastian Vettel in Brazil. And that has to stop. To me, that's the most dangerous thing in racing, is for two cars to touch wheels on the straight where there's nowhere to go if something happens. So there we go. There we go. Something about Liam's helmets now. I mean, I knew it would be fatal for me to use Liam as a good example. 25 Singapore Grand Prix, Liam will debut a special fan-designed helmet featuring Kiwiana themes, including a cartoon Kiwi in a pink cap driving a Gold kart designed by local Ian Ebbs. Well, I could say, well, there you go. But then equally I say, Liam actually is a very cool guy, and I know he did a lot of good work for charity over the winter as well with these hot laps in New Zealand. So I don't know. I just think we should keep the. I just think that helmets should be relatively standardized, so we know that this design goes with this driver. Giori, hi Peter, love your show. What you see about Lewis Hamilton that you don't like? Well, there's nothing that I don't like about Lewis. I've always liked him, and he's a good guy, and hopefully we're still good friends. And I just think, what don't I like about Lewis? Nothing about Lewis. I don't know. I've never said there's anything I don't like about Lewis. I just think it's sad to see him not driving the way he did in 21. I understand why he doesn't and isn't. But I think one of the ways to get back at that level would be this totally focused approach that I suggested. And let's hope then that on top of that, that the Ferrari is a very quick car. And that's it. I love everything else about Lewis. I've always said I think he's done a very good job of separating his racing life from his private life, and because he's done a good job with that, it's one of the reasons he's been such a good racing driver and been able to keep going for so long. But I'd love to see him driving as well as he did in 21. That's for sure. So there we go. Lots of questions still. Sorry, there's another super chat down here. That was a Solberg one. Got that one. Yeah, guys, gonna have to gonna have to try and get through some of these also when I go on community page when I get a chance to do that. And sorry, we're not getting through them all now. It's so nice of everybody to be asking so many questions. Just reading through somebody, do you think Norris has similar qualities to Mika or just similar matchup? I don't think he's as quick as Mika Hakkinen, if that's what you're saying. I think Mika was seriously quick. I think Lando is quick, but I wouldn't put him in Mika's class. I'd put him in DC's class. So, yeah. There we go. There's lots of very nice comments from everybody. Max says, Newey has equity in Aston and control. Well, yeah, not control of the company, that's for sure. That'll be Lawrence Stroll, but he's definitely, in charge. So there we go. Right. We shouldn't really have these ones up. Bono Bronk, thanks for your great analysis, Peter. There were 3 million pages of the Epstein files released. Was Flavio the only one of Formula One names mentioned? Well, you can go through all the pages. Was Flavio mentioned? What a laugh. Well, there you go. Okay. Yeah. Trail Breaks just mentioning the other Minardi drivers of note. Pierluigi Martini, he was good. Mark Webber, Giancarlo Fisichella, Jarno Trulli. Yeah, absolutely. Old Giancarlo Martini was very good for that. Okay, got to stop. It's going on and on and on. It was so many good questions. It's so annoying not to get them. I'm going to ask, what was the last question that came in? Of course, Flavio was there. He says, lo. Thanks, Peter. How funny, isn't that? That's brilliant. I didn't realize that. Recently, Komatsu-san talks about the Grosjean crash on High Performance Podcast. Yeah, well, if you want to know about Grosjean, his shunt, go to the Formula One exhibition and the interview I did with him about that and how he getting out of the car. He goes into it in minute detail. So there you go. So Chip McDonald says, hate to say it, but Stroll does well in the rain. Poor old Lance. Come on, let's start a new Lance Stroll fan club on this show now. Because he does do stuff with Rob Wilson. So do not underestimate him. If somebody's bright enough and self-critical enough to do work with Rob Wilson, and there are plenty of reasons why a guy like Lance Stroll wouldn't want to go to, Bedford in the wet when he could be doing something else in London town or wherever he lives, then give him credit for that. He could do something. Okay. Jotma says, Sanchez as a designer at Alpine could turn things around. Great infrastructure. Okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt of that. Absolutely with you on that one. And as I say, I think Gasly will be good at that as well. Talking of Jordan, miss EJ. Yeah, we all miss EJ. Hi EJ, wherever you are. Hope you're having fun. And final question, wasn't Jim Clark further ahead of all his peers and anyone ever? No better question with which to end this live stream. Thank you very much indeed for that. That's nothing more needs to be said on that one. So thanks everybody. Very, very, a lot of fun actually, this one, isn't it? And we'll be doing more. As I say, the next Tuesday, I think it's next Tuesday, I'll confirm it all on, whatever, all the social media that I think Mark will be joining us live. So you'll be able to ask all your questions, your technical questions to Mark about the new regs and management, engine management, all that stuff. So there you go. Anyway, have a good weekend coming up soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being with us. Take care. Stay safe.